Do you want more success, more growth, more results? Then it's time for the Boundless Success Accelerator from the Modern Observer Group. This isn't your average coaching program. It's where top performers come to dominate. Weekly group sessions, on-demand coaching, a community that's got your back, and a power-packed library of tools to supercharge your business and career. No more excuses, no more waiting. Get in, level up, and start building the life you've been dreaming about. Visit us at modernobserver.com/boundlesssuccess to join today. Let's get you to the next level.
We are lighting the candle, a world that works. Hello, everyone. I am Bill Correll. I am here with my good dear friend Jan Jeremias. The two of us get together on a weekly basis or thereabouts, have a conversation with each other, and see if we can't create some language around empowerment. Have a good time and maybe share some of ourselves with you. I think with that being said, we're now into the month of March. It feels like 2025 is half over now. It's going by very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is my birthday month. And we have a lot of other folks who have birthdays this month as well, not to mention other sort of historic things in my family. But what's interesting for me this week, we made our pilgrimage to Denver. We went out there just about 3 weeks ago on Wednesday. Managed to sit in front of somebody who hacked the entire time that we were flying out to Denver. No problems, no symptoms until day 5 after we were there. So that left us with 2 days left on the trip to come back home. By day 5, I was coming down with a scratchy throat. By day 6 and the flight home on day 7, I was pretty miserable. I just took a couple of Benadryl, and slept the entire way on the plane, all 3.5 hours. Then my dear wife came down with it about 3 days later, which would have been 5 days from the time that I started showing symptoms, and I'm finally just about over it at this point, kind of clearing up when I get out of bed in the morning. But my dear wife is still struggling with some coughing and that sort of thing. But but she's a trooper, so she just keeps going. Definitely an ever ready bunny. And you, once again, being the ever ready bunny that you are, Jan, you appear to have gotten through another winter here with no flu.
Well, don't give me any bad luck kind of thing. I have to say, in some ways, I don't cocoon myself. So it's not like I'm not out. But if I do happen to know that someone is unwell, I do
Right,
choose not to be around them.
right.
Yeah. And so we have a mutual friend we were doing an event together, and I kind of was like, but both her kids had the flu, and I was like, and I was waiting. And then I had to drop something off at her house, and both her kids are sick. And she's like, "Do you want to come in?" And I'm like, "No, no, no, no. It's really okay. Like, I don't
No,
really need to come in right now, right now." So I do try to be a little bit wise about those things now. Um, I had the same thing with a client this morning who takes care of her grandson and drops him off at school, and said to me he got sick on the way to school this morning, and he's now at my house. Do you still want to come? And I'm like, eh, maybe we should wait till next week, because I see her weekly. I said, maybe we'll just push it out. I'll reach out to her maybe about doing a later day in the week. But I think I try to be a little bit, like I said, wise about it now. Yeah.
well, I'll tell you, it seems to me I went many years and never got a flu shot. And I
Mhm.
mean, seriously, I didn't start getting a flu shot until probably, I don't know, the year of COVID. The first year, we had gotten one before in the fall of 2019, first one ever.
Mhm.
Uh, and then I've gotten a flu shot every single year. But here's the neat thing: I've also gotten the flu every single year that I've gotten a flu shot. So my wife explains it away, saying they can't cover everything. And I'm saying, well, I know it doesn't cost us anything, but shouldn't it, shouldn't I have at least 1 year where I go without having the flu? And
I mean, I'm not gonna chime in on my opinion. I have had one flu shot in my entire life, and that year I did get the flu, and there were 2 variants, and I got both. And after that, I thought, I don't think so.
right.
So I just, you know, that's just, that's just me. And part
Yeah.
of it is, just my sort of philosophy on the fact that I think if you are basically healthy, then then it's, and I'm not saying to anybody who has, like, my brother's been so sick, and so, for the last, like, month. So I get it. Like, it's just, you have to make personal choices. Like, I don't think there's a cookie cutter, like a cookie cutter protocol for everybody, or like, idea of the way they should, what they should do. I think you have to learn how to listen to yourself and know your history and then make a choice.
Well, the interesting part of it is that, like I said, I haven't missed a season without getting the flu. And typically is when I'm around groups of people, either going on a cruise or, flying. So I used to fly all the time and go on cruises before and never had a flu shot, never got the flu. But being over 60 years old, and my wife she's pretty studied up on these things, and I trust her, for the most part. But I have stopped getting, COVID shots as well. I just don't, you know, there, that wasn't, um, I have nothing other than my own personal story to reflect on with regard to that. But I felt like I had symptoms as a result of having those vaccines. That's a personal choice that each one of us has to make on your own.
That's right. I mean, like I said, the only year I ever got it was the year that the 2 variants was, and I was really sick that year, like, really sick. I
Really.
thought, I'm just not, that's my choice. I was also quite young, and I don't know, I must have been in my 30s or something, and I also it was a requirement for for work at that time.
Right.
So I had to get it for work. So after that, I don't really know if I had to get it or they just were suggesting people get it, and so I did. And then afterwards, I was like, "You can suggest all you want, but I'm not doing it," kind of thing. But I am never, like I said, I think like you said, it's a personal decision you have to make. I mean, Eh, and it depends on so many different things. It depends on your age, it depends on whether you have any other underlying medical conditions
Right.
that you're dealing with and you can't afford basically to get, like, let's say, an upper respiratory and cough, or you can't afford, like, you're just, you know, let's say your immune system just can't handle it.
Right.
So that's, a decision that you have to make, and you have to make with if you have a health professional, you can make it with your health professional.
Yep.
And with you chiming in, I'm not saying you leave it all up to them, because I was having this conversation. I've had, like, the same conversation like 3 or 4 times over the past, like, week, of like, yourself better than any doctor does.
Yeah.
And so listen to that kind of thing.
Oh, and by the way, your mileage may vary. There's a bell curve in terms of performance for all of these vaccines. Some that just abjectly don't work, or you have a completely negative response to it, all the way out on one extreme, to it completely makes you bulletproof, on the other extreme. But then there's a lot of people in the middle who have mixed experience with it. But there's two things that I have done in the two vaccines that I had this past fall. One was for pneumonia, and the other one was for shingles, my
Mm.
second shingle shot, which uh, both of those things, my doctor was indifferent if I got another COVID shot or if I got the flu shot. Recommended the flu shot. Absolutely said at my age, because I'm over 25 now, that I definitely needed to have the pneumonia and the shingle shot. So I am up to speed on both of those at this point. And funny enough, well, we're just really not going to tempt fate by furthering this conversation anymore, other than to say it's been a tough year. There are so many people that you and I know that have gotten their butts kicked. You know,
Oh, I mean, I don't remember I mean, I mean, I'm always quite transparent. My brother, when I tell you, I mean, they almost hospitalized him twice. I mean, he has severe respiratory problems,
right?
very bad. And I mean, he's basically lived at the doctor's office. I think that he's because he didn't want to go into the hospital, they've been seeing him like every other day or every day.
Sure.
And it's just, and it's just it is, there are a number of people that I know who've just been really wiped out this season.
Right.
And then like you mentioned Jan's cough, that and the other thing is that cough seems to linger. Like and so
Well, it's
yeah,
interesting one too. It really for her, when she gets started in a jag, it takes a minute or two. I mean, literally 60 to 120 seconds for her to be finished with it. It just
right.
keeps on. Uh, Kind of a feeling of helplessness for me because there's nothing I can do other than just kind of cheer her on, or kind of
Yeah.
feel the empathy of the situation.
Yeah, I've made a few people some like holistic remedies and essential oil based things that I'm not saying it's but it is they opted to do that, so I was like, or they were open to me dropping it off. So because I never do that without asking.
Yeah.
Um so yeah, so that, I think sometimes those sort of like what I almost think of like our grandmother's recipes kind of thing, that date back in time are really efficacious. Maybe they don't have any concrete studies around them, but those old like folk remedies really do a lot.
We still we still eat chicken soup when we get sick.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, and things like, I think there's a lot to be said for, I've had, I've done some interesting things through the years, especially when I didn't want to use any over the counter stuff, trying to bring a fever down, you know.
Well, chicken soup has been a comfort food going back to when I was a small child. And the first, actually, the first Jewish folks that we had any contact with were next door neighbors when we lived in Westminster, Colorado. Their last name was Raybon, and they were actually Brazilian, by the way.
Mhm, mhm.
And the, Walter was his wife was Brazilian. Walter was American, but they were both Jewish. And he said we were sick with the chicken pox one time, and he brought over a big thing of what he called Jewish penicillin. And I'll never forget that. That was the first time I heard that when I was about 5 years old.
Yep. Yeah, but there's a lot of other remedies of, that people would use for a lot of the spice oils were really antiviral. And, if you go, so they have a few, and some of them are, written down through the years and old texts and things. And, when you do more natural forms of healing, those are the texts you're referring to. Texts are examples or, remedies they gave that were thousands of years old, which a lot of them turn out to be actually scientifically efficacious. At the time, though, you kind of wonder, but a lot of them prove to be, not just, old wives' tales kind of thing or just superstitious.
Well, I think that all of the remedies have had their opportunity um, to be selected, in uh, I mean, naturally selected, if you will. And it just seems like the ones that continued to work stuck around, and the ones that didn't work, we don't know about those. They're not here anymore.
That's a good point, and that's very true because I think that it's always interesting to me when you go back and then all of a sudden you read something and you're still like, there's still like, I mean, still people like still like, lemon and honey is one of them. Like
Yes.
people are always like lemon and honey. If you're lemon and ginger and honey, if you have a sore throat, you know, and or a scratchy throat. I mean, I don't think that's changed in the past. I mean, certain other things which now they actually were adopted, which were like cloves for clove oil and cloves for tooth pain and
I-
have been used forever. And actually, a lot of the over the counter stuff actually they took the active ingredient out, but that's actually what it is actually the active ingredient in clove.
yeah.
So some of them, that was because it had anesthetic properties or numbing properties. And they were like, oh, okay, we can utilize this.
Yeah. Same thing for apple cider vinegar.
Yeah.
Um, my father-in-law, who passed when he was 83 years old, but unfortunately he had what we didn't call it dementia back in those days, and we didn't call it Alzheimer's. We called it hardening of the arteries. Back
Uh huh.
back in 1983. So there may have been some cool kids that were calling it those advanced names back then, but we didn't. But he took a couple of ounces of apple cider vinegar every single night. I don't remember him ever having a cold or having the flu.
I used to do apple cider vinegar a lot. And then I had to stop, but I used to have it daily. Used to be like my morning drink was apple cider vinegar, warm water, and lemon
Yep.
for a long time. But I mean, I just think that, like I said, I'm not telling people not to do more traditional, but I do think I love those kind of home remedies because the one thing that you use the word, um, with Jan is that the reason I got into trying to use some of these things is because I was in positions where I felt very helpless. Like, and that's the one good thing about a lot of these things is they're empowering because at least you can sit there and feel like you're doing something and you're just not waiting for something to like to go away. It's waiting and kind of like a little bit of a prayer. It's kind of like I really hope, like I remember years ago I got it might have been no, but it was quite a long time ago. I didn't get the flu, but I got like a sinus infection. And and I mean, I could not smell a thing. And I took the strongest essential oil, and I remember putting it on a Q-tip and putting it like up my nose and thinking to myself, like, I must be able to, because it was so strong. I'm going to be able, and I couldn't smell it. And I remember getting a tinge fearful because I thought to myself, this is my career and so much of what I do. Like, if I can't smell, this
Yeah.
isn't a good thing, like almost this element of like praying in a way. You're like, you realize how fragile
Yeah.
the human body is when things like that happen, and you are
Absolutely.
so wiped out. And you're like, you can't lift your head up, and you think to yourself, oh my gosh, like all of a sudden, this idea that we're superhuman and that we can withstand anything, like we can handle anything, all of a sudden we realize that that's not necessarily true.
Yeah. Well, see, that's one of the things that Janet, my wife, is her complaint is that since she had COVID the second time, she has had literally no sense of smell whatsoever. And she said, uh, except for there are some times when she thinks she smells something coming out of her that's not there. It's really weird. I've never heard of it before, but there from time to time she stops talking about it lately, so it's not really happening. But this time last year, through the early part of the spring, she was constantly saying, "Hey, would you come over here and just take a sniff?" And I'd go over and I'd say, "No, you smell fine." And my schnoz works really good.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we do emit like an odor. depending on what's happening, like toxins being released from our body,
Right.
kind kind of thing. But there is, I know that there has been, I've known another number of people that I think it eventually came back, but who did have, real problems with losing their sense of smell from COVID.
Yeah. So anyway, here we are. We're almost halfway through our podcast hour, and we haven't really talked about anything yet. We're almost turning into a Seinfeld episode. Have you noticed that? The show about nothing?
The show about nothing. Yeah, I think sometimes shows about nothing are really good though, Bill, because if we get started talking about certain things, I don't know, would be really good. It's kind of a relief to talk about nothing, It's like, but no, I'm trying to think of what I've been focused on this. So well, I know something that's been on my mind of late
Yep.
because and actually it's going to be on my Zoom event with Mary Jane on Friday. We're talking about boundaries and healthy boundaries and boundaries that we create ourselves and sort of realizing that you have put up boundaries or walls, and also the idea of healthy boundaries. And I guess it came to me because I was having a conversation the other day, and the person I was communicating with definitely crossed a boundary that I was not willing. Like, I'm very open, but I actually had to say something. I'm like, don't go there. Like, don't, like, you're treading territory that was basically, and I was trying to figure out what about it, but I realized that it was infringing on that which I truly value and which I hold like is such an integral part of who I am, that I was just like, okay. And so I've been playing with this idea of boundaries and walls, and then like like and then also kind of vulnerability and authenticity, you know,
Right.
on the other kind of, so that's what it's on my, I have I'm very deep thinking these days.
Well, I kind of personally in my in my experience and in my training of both myself and other people, I think the boundary conversation is one where you're really starting to identify that those areas where you can be responsible in advance before you have a mechanism or you have the whatever it takes to be able to allow somebody in your presence to broach those subjects where it really doesn't bother you any longer. And I can tell you that it's a hell of a lot better to identify the things that you don't want to talk about, and keep friends uh, up to date with that. And then what you'll find sometimes is that somebody will come back to you later and they'll say, well, you know what, blah blah blah. Oh no, that's something you don't like to talk about. And then, funny enough, you can, time's gone by and you say, well, no, that doesn't bother me anymore. What do you got? Uh, and
I
especially
mean, this is, but it wasn't like I minded that they were bringing it up. I just didn't want them to push it.
right,
I was, and so it wasn't like I cared that they were bringing it up in conversation.
right.
It was just, you know, you're crossing a line. Like, don't push me in that direction. I'm open to listening to about it, but don't push me to act a different way than I feel over this, because, you know, that's not going to happen. I mean, but one of the things that you said, and I think that, and I also have been very focused on, and I actually realized at one point, the boundaries or the walls we create and we put around ourselves or we label ourselves. It's like, so, how we limit ourselves based on certain boundaries and beliefs or walls that we put up. And then all of a sudden realizing that the reason something hasn't come about is because you had that wall. You put up that boundary. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is me.
Yeah, see, that's perfect. And it's also kind of a it's a flag, if there's something that upsets you or you consider to be a breakdown in communication, that is a place where you've put a boundary in place and you've forgotten about it. If something is upsetting to you in a conversation, and you don't know why, it's more than likely it's from an earlier similar conversation that didn't work out, or something happened that was not a desirable result or was an unacceptable result. With that said, we have these things called triggers, so we don't have to remember this. This is not something where you need to look at your pocket and pull out a list of things where you have boundaries. Your your automatic will take care of that for you. And there's always this opportunity whenever you have a first reaction to something, to take a beat, like before automatically responding to it and saying, no, we can't talk about that. But take a beat and be open to the possibility that what you thought you heard that would be infringing on your boundary, since we're using that term in this conversation, might not even have anything to do with your boundary. It might be a completely different set of words, that have a different meaning from the speaker than what seems to be coming up for you. So I think all of these things are when somebody decides that they want to be a master communicator, that means that you're really opening the door to a lot of situations where there's potential for discomfort, or where the conversation has to go a few more sentences than sometimes would seem like it is comfortable for you.
Well, I mean, I was just thinking because I was thinking about what you said about, if somebody triggers you. And I had that like a week and a half ago with something, and I got off, and I got upset, and I vented to somebody, and I said, I could let this, I don't know. I'll just tell you what the story was because it's so much easier than trying to be like not, trying to. So I had
It's
a,
just you and me, so go ahead.
that's right, and the thousands of people listening. So I had a situation where I contacted somebody, and and really they should have responded. It was something, a family member about something, and they really should have written back, and they didn't.
Right.
And I was really upset. And then I go down the whole scenario in my head, about how they never respond and whatever, and, like all that kind of stuff. And I vented to somebody. And then it was that person's birthday the next day. And I turned to her and said, if I wanted to be how I'm feeling right now, I would not call them on their birthday. Like I would just say, basically, whatever you, and I'm not calling, kind of thing. And I called, they didn't pick up, and I left a message, and then I texted again and just said, I hope you got my birthday message or whatever. And I could have ruminated and had it gone on for days and days and days. And then I just looked at it and said, old trigger, old story, done.
Yep.
Old story, gone. And so I gave myself the right to feel angry. And I think I had every legitimate reason why I should feel why I, in that
Yeah.
situation.
Oh, you're
But
always right when you're in that place. You're always right.
right, right. And then I just said, okay, old story. I'm just not going to let it bother me anymore. Because otherwise I would have been there for weeks, And then the only person that it's really hurting is me, because I guarantee you that they probably didn't even know I was upset. And so I think that those are the pivotal moments when we could recognize, to me now. And so you talked about trigger, and I was in last Friday's um, conversation that I have with Mary Jane. We were reading an article, and they talked about triggers, and then the opposite word was, which was opportunities to go out and look for, positive things. And they called that glimmers.
Yes.
And I thought, okay, and so she was talking about, which I loved. She said she called us, she grew up calling them precious moments. Like that's what her mother called them. And so when she had her kids, she would put them on a mission each day that they had to go out in the world and find one thing that they thought was amazing on a given day, like one precious moment. And I thought it was, first of all, I thought it was so sweet to like begin your day looking for something good, like looking for something that was amazing. And she said her son is now grown up and he texts her every day with something that he has gone out and found. And I thought, wow, was that so sweet? Like, I just thought that was great. And I just thought to myself, like, so it was triggers versus glimmers.
Yeah, I've heard of something similar. However, I my understanding, in the context that I heard them was you don't get to vote on either one of them. The thing that makes you feel warm inside for no reason is a glimmer. The thing that upsets you for no reason is a trigger. Okay. Well, and all that's good for is to give you a name for a feeling that you're having if it's so, I mean, you can ask yourself, is this, rocks are rocks, trees are trees, this is a trigger or this is a glimmer? And I like the glimmers, so let's get more of those if possible. I don't really like the triggers, but I guess that's me. I got to work on that, don't I?
Yeah, but I also liked the fact of just going out in the world and looking for the positive, because
Well,
I think that that really resonated, because I think that that's for a lot of people these days that's really hard. Like
yeah,
they're having trouble finding anything that's positive.
yes,
And so I think, if we could go out and think of, or feel that feel something positive on a given day, every day,
yes,
then that puts everybody in a better place. And so no matter what then is going on, you just tend to handle it better. And so I've been very focused on that. Then I've been practicing um just a meditation technique I've really liked lately. Like a few minutes, like I mean, I do it throughout my day. It's not even for meditation. It's just a great way for me to kind of center myself when I'm feeling really stressed. So these little, what I call mindful moments, because between a meeting or I get up and I'm like, okay, just and really simple for 5 seconds, and I'm like, okay, now I can move forward.
yeah.
Sort of like a recalibration if I was a GPS. My own human GPS.
Well, back in the 1990s, I developed this technique of creating a button in the center of my mind, which was like you press the button and you get a new restart, like a new Mario in the Super Mario Brothers. Every time he gets killed, all you have to do is just press the reset button. You get a new Mario and get going again. And I just thought that was kind of a neat little metaphor for, for getting back into the game when I really didn't feel like it. And
I
I
never
got
played video games, so I can't relate to that example, but I'll take your word for it.
well, to a poet, it would be like tearing the page off and getting yourself a new blank page.
Okay, thank you for speaking my language.
There you go. And you are one hell of a poet, by the way. I
Oh,
think
thank you.
your words communicate at such a number of levels at the same time. I think I would compare your poems to fine cooking, where there's not
Oh,
just one flavor, there's layers of flavors. You know what I'm
oh,
saying?
yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. There's the superficial, there's the first thing you see. And then there's the well, yeah, how would I interpret that as a 5-year old? How would I interpret that as a 25-year-old? How would I interpret that as a 60-year-old? That sort of thing. Or how would I interpret that from from the object's standpoint, the person you're writing about, and all that. So I encourage you to keep doing it. I believe your words give life, and it's an
Oh,
important thing. Yeah,
thank you.
you're
So
welcome.
yeah, no, appreciate that. And so it's very interesting though how I think that, if I can encourage anybody today is like just to, I decided recently that I was going to give myself space between meetings. Like enough time to, at least walk around the house or take a breath outside or um space things out a little bit better just for a few seconds even because I tend to overschedule myself. Just like my to-do list is like, you know, is endless and will never get completed. And I used to get upset every day because I hadn't completed it. And then all of a sudden one day I woke up and I said, I'm never going to complete all this and I'm always going to have a to-do list. So, you know, so don't stress about it.
It's interesting. It's that old conversation about the difference in in life when you consider yourself as being a human being rather than a human doing. Uh, so much of our life is spent capturing the undone and listing it, so that we've got all of this uh, pile of things that are undone in front of us. And so um, you have a to-do list, but when you change the language to a to-be list, the list becomes shorter. And funny enough, the need to have a detailed, lengthy to-do list kind of goes away. Your calendar becomes your existence system. It gets it out of your head. You do make lists and you accumulate things on the lists, and from time to time you go in and you discard those things that no longer have any juice for you or are no longer something that's even important in your life. But the whole notion of having a to-be list as opposed to a to-do list is kind of a neat thing for people to try on.
Well, recently I was on with this lovely woman, Darlene, who were working on a project together, and she was on my Friday Zoom conversation and meditation. And she said she moved it from a to do list to a to da list, which
Yeah.
I absolutely love. So I now have a to da list.
Ta-da!
And so yeah, exactly. And, but this whole idea of that and reclassifying so that I don't classify things that I love as being tasks. I've now taken them off or kind of have them in a different category on my to-do list
Yeah.
because I realized that I had things on my to-do list which were things that I love to do. And I had made them tasks. And all of a sudden when I looked at that, I thought, why am I doing that? I love to do that. And it took away this idea of it being a chore versus something that kind of makes my heart sing instead.
Yeah, and I guess that's the fundamental distinction between they're both are going to be opportunities to remember something, to be an effective trigger, if you will, or to glimmer, if you will. If you stop and think about it, there are certain things that have deadlines; those have to be honored. But then there are the things while you're working on so many deadlines that you absolutely forget to do until all of a sudden you remember. So why not put those things, the things, to remind you to be kind, to be thoughtful, to be self-caring, all of those sorts of things, um, and activities as opposed to tasks, if you
I
will.
mean, I would put those on my to-do list, but I just think it was my perception of them being so task oriented, and
Right.
so it it really made them almost unenjoyable. And then all of a sudden I thought to myself, like, I enjoy so many of these things. Like, why am I categorizing them with, or can I find joy in the things that I really would label as I don't enjoy?
Right.
And then you get into being mindful. Like, can I find the beauty in, oh, I like actually folding laundry, but I'll use this as an example. Like, can I find enjoyment in those things versus considering them tasks and chores?
Right. Yeah, there's a lot there. I think there's a fundamental philosophy that some people have with that every activity is an opportunity to express who you are in the world at a very profound level and not be amazed by it, and then to be amazed by it, both not be amazed and be amazed at the same time.
Hmm.
Folding laundry, how you put your clothes away, what you do with things that are valuable to you, how you sort things out of your life that are no longer valuable, so that you can have ample space in between the things that are valuable to you. That creating this space for something to be, stand on its own a little bit, not just be part of clutter and background noise. Um, these are kinds of the things that an on-purpose human being has to put some thought into, and the whole notion, of feng shui is 100% that. It's making a decision about what serves you and how you want to be greeted when coming into a space, and where the best energy flow will be, and being mindful of energy and all the things that you do and all the objects that you place in your life. Kind of cool.
Hmm. Yeah, and this is almost like, um, I actually love feng shui. So, and you know, had someone come out to my old house and, you know, help me with a few things or whatever at one point. But I love the idea. It's almost like feng shui for the mind
Yeah.
is what you're like. It's feng shui for the mind as I'm talking about it now, of um of directing your thoughts so that the energy flows in the best direction.
Yes. Yeah, there is a real knack to being able to create space in your own thinking, and that space allows new things to occur as opposed to rehashing 80,000 times a day the things that are already there. And I think that that's what really gives people an exciting life, is when there's something that can be, mm, you know, thoughtfully created before it actually happens, so that there's room in your life to notice, what we always talk about, the joy of looking at a flower and really seeing how it's constructed and seeing all the different textures, and counting how many points there's always an odd number of petals, they tell me, in nature. Some flowers, it's easy to count them and see if that's so. There are other flowers where, to spend the time doing it would be really futile. So, but the notion of being that much the master of what you will spend your energy on, what you will give energy, what you will take energy from, that I think is kind of a neat place for human beings to hang out a little bit, and thoughtfully give that some mass and some dimension.
Yeah, and I think that, it works kind of like what I was saying, like those you're starting to train yourself to look for those things even when you're not there, because they just make whatever you're going to do more like your day more joyful or pleasant.
Yeah.
So, and then bringing them into different aspects of your life. So, one thing I've been doing, and I did a number of walks and meditations like this when we had a lot of snow, is looking out, or since I have to walk Tonka, so I'm out in it anyway, is looking at the different shades of white, like choosing a color and trying to see all the degradations,
Right.
or going for, and even just driving yesterday, I decided that I was going to look for one color. So I kept on looking. I was looking for all the objects that I could see while I was driving, obviously not driving unsafely, that were red. So all of a sudden, like paying attention to things that I don't normally pay attention to, because all of a sudden I'd pass a house with a door that was red that I must have passed like 1,000 times, but never noticed that they had a red door.
Right.
And just going out as I walk or as I travel, and I'm just like, oh, look, that billboard is red, and that, or whatever color you choose. And it just makes the experience, you're very present
Yeah.
for the experience. And the reason I'm so focused lately on presence or this idea is because right now I've been going through a lot, like many people are, and I'm trying to find a little bit of space, and it gives my mind something to do. So it gives my mind a direction. If I am looking for red, I'm not thinking about the stuff in my head or the fact that I've gone through that same scenario in my head like a dozen times. And so at least for that moment or for those moments, I'm not thinking about like whatever, whatever's going on that I don't want to think about, or that I've been spending too much time thinking about.
Right.
So it just gives me a guide, and it gives me a little space around what might be a challenging issue at the time.
I like that. I really do. I think intentionally creating a game is a human being thing. And if we just thought of it more, we could spend so much more time being absent of feelings that we really don't want to have. You know, if you have to have a feeling in order to not want to have it, does that make sense? So,
Mhm.
what if you just didn't have those feelings? Gee, if one of them showed up every once in a while, that might be something that you could say, "Oh, I wonder what's up with that," and not
I
have
mean,
it be something to avoid.
I do think feelings and emotions are definitely messengers, and so I'm never into like um not into telling people that they shouldn't feel or whatever, or they shouldn't, and telling someone, and I'm also not telling anybody not to think because that's totally impossible.
Right.
But giving yourself what I would almost like a little buffer around those times is very advantageous to
Yeah.
your physical and your mental health, because I think that it does give you that time to take a breath. Let's say,
Yeah.
oh, give you a little perspective around something.
Well, with our kids, whenever we went on a long trip, we always played either a state license plate. Whoever had the dollar got to call out what state license plate we were looking for, or what kind of a vehicle, a red car truck, or we don't have those around much anymore. But when we were kids, they were kind of rare, but not all that much. And it was a different kind of a form of what we used to call, punch buggy, punch buggy black, no punchback. Whenever you saw a Volkswagen, it gave you an opportunity to be bad.
Uh, that I
It's
don't know, but we used to play license plate a lot, where we would drive and have to, and look for different license plates or keep a list of all the different license plates from all the different places we saw. And, and that was always a way to make the trip go. And it was the basically the video game or the videos in the car before there were videos in the car and before there were video games.
yes.
A long
We
trip.
had, yeah, we had to do something to keep kids from slugging each other when there were no punch buggies around.
Yeah, exactly. I just remember that my brother was the kid who would like literally we would get down the driveway. Like we wouldn't even be down the driveway yet. And he'd be like, "Are we there yet?"
It's a
And
thing.
be like, it'd be like, "We haven't even moved."
Yep. Yeah, one of the early episodes of The Simpsons. That was Bart. Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
So yeah, so funny because there's always one in every family.
Yes, ma'am.
So, but I guess I'm almost curious to, now as we're having this conversation today, Bill, is I don't know if people comment or would, right? But I'd be curious to know what people do to find space around things,
Right.
around, anything that they're going through. Do they even think of to look for space around something? And
Look for and or create it, you know?
oh, absolutely.
And that's even possible, where there's clutter. You can actually take something like, I don't know, um, from time to time over the years, my wife and my chest of drawers, the top of it, sometimes it's a challenge to see what color the wood is because there are so many things that are stacked up on it. However, taking a moment and just kind of reviewing everything that's there without the need to touch it or move things around or remove anything, but to do kind of a little quick mental inventory of everything that's in that space and then recreate it again, a half hour later in a different room. It's kind of a neat little game to play, similar, to your looking for red, but not the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, yeah, I think going through, I mean, I think anything we can do which causes us to pause and kind of disrupts, I like the word disrupts, our, disrupts our self talk, disrupts our um, sort of conditioned way of thinking
Yeah.
is um, is really advantageous.
Yeah, I think it's a good word. It's not one that necessarily has to have a negative connotation to it. Sometimes disrupt is an interruption, um, but a disruption, I think, is something that comes from a thought, that there is a thought of something needing to be interrupted. And so the disruption is the actual manifesting of that interruption or a set of interruptions so that some kind of a new reality can form or can be present.
It was interesting because I think I mentioned, if I didn't mention, I'll mention here. So I've been using, based on somebody who recommended, I've been using this app called My Jogger, which is basically random reminders. It's an app, random reminders on your phone.
Right.
So it's like a reminder that if you were to set an alarm clock, but this is like you reminded, like it's reminding me of two different things 7 times a day. And I have a program to remind me between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And then it just like I have it's not scheduled. So it's randomly 7 times throughout the day. So I have no idea when it's going to go off. So one of them is like, what is your self talk? Like, what are you saying to yourself right now?
Yep.
And it was just interesting to see that what was like the predominant way of like the predominant thoughts that I was having throughout the day that I didn't even realize I was having until it reminded me, and I'd be like, "Oh, there I am again," and all of a sudden, until it was very, very, it was very obvious to me. But the other thing is that the first week or two, I found it annoying because I felt like it was interrupting me. And I would be in, now I basically, if I'm busy, I don't pay attention to it nor more or less because I'm on a task or I turn it off so I won't be disturbed.
Right.
Then when I am just, you know, about my day, it does go off and it causes me to pause and just say, oh, I was thinking about that again. Depending on what it is, could I shift out of that? If it's like for me, it's been a lot of worry lately.
Sure.
So can I just shift it out of that place of worry right now? And, just to give me a little space or whatever, or even make me laugh at the fact that there I am again. It's like, oh, here I am again, back on the same road.
No. Yeah, all of the cliches all point to each other, don't they? Wherever I go, there I am.
Oh, yes, I know, I know. That's one of my favorites, by the way, though.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I think it's an adult function to start questioning who we are in the matter of our own sanity, who we are in the matter of our own enjoyment of life, of satisfaction, all of those things, self-expression. And when you start to see that those if you're living a life where you don't really have much to say about it, um, there's not a lot of enjoyment around that. But even if you've got things that are upsetting, having at least some sense of being able to make a difference with how your life goes from time to time, even if it doesn't work all the time, right? Is a better place for you to be emotionally and spiritually than being in that place where you can't escape. You know, there's no getting away from the next bad thing that's going to happen to you, and that's all you're living for is to try to avoid that as long as possible, or something else of that nature. Which means that you're not living your life, you're not being present to what's really going on any longer. As you said before, you're walking around having those thoughts that are taking you away from your opportunity to really see things.
Mhm. And one of the words that, came to mind when you were just speaking, Bill, and I know it's a word that nobody likes to hear, but there are 2 words. One is choice,
Yep.
and then the other one is responsibility.
Right.
Responsibility has this very sort of, I don't know, it doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies. Like, I mean, it's just, but there is an element of basically being responsible for your own, I guess, your own thoughts and your own emotions. And, to me, in a lot of ways, your own health. It's like this ownership of, and so I think of, and people don't like the word responsible, like
Mm,
you're responsible for this, but I really do think it is a responsibility. Like it's our own responsibility.
right. Oftentimes, that's not a word that we want to be reminded of, is it?
Not at all. I think that
You know,
that yeah, go ahead, Bill.
well, see that for some people, it's easier to believe they have nothing to say about what's going on in their life than it would be for them to say, I've got to be responsible for what happens to me. And I don't know what that is, but in our culture, we are probably the most litigious culture on the face of the planet. You go to France, uh, you step off a curb over there, and you think and you get hit by somebody who's driving over here. That's an instant lawsuit. Could be worth $500,000 over there. The answer from all the French people is, "It sucks to be you. Next time, watch where you're going." The motorist has the right of way out there. You're just a peon. You don't have a car. What are you doing out in his space? It's a different way of thinking entirely.
But I do think that there is this element of, I always looked at it and I always could see it very clearly, I guess, in the health realm, because I always looked at like the fact that, I was responsible for my own health and well-being, and now I think I'm getting the well-being more all of a sudden. I think in the past like year, it's become very clear to me that the world goes on as the world goes on.
Yes.
And not to say that I don't care, that's not what I'm saying at all, because I care deeply. It's how do I best navigate the fact that the world's going to go on, and you know
Yeah. Yeah, McCartney wrote a good song about that. Obla di obla da. Life goes on, brah. La la, how the life goes on. And the neat part of it is that that could be freeing for you, or it might be something that kind of takes your breath away, or something completely different than those two things. But the point is that when you realize that life is like a river that's going by all the time, and we think that we've got time.
Hmm.
Always remember, that I don't know who, I think it was Aristotle who basically said, the joke is you think you have time.
Mm.
Which is, kind of a neat thing. Decide, you know, act, review, then decide. All depends on what kind of life you want. And if you realize that you do have some choice, as you said before, and then once you know you have choice, we're naked in the garden, aren't we?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's the realization that I mean, there are aspects which you always have a choice in
Right.
because the choice is around how you respond or react.
Yeah.
And that is your choice. So it's that's really where it gets to be like that's your choice and your choice alone. And so you always, have a choice.
And the fact of the matter is you do choose. It just doesn't seem that way to you, but you are choosing all the time.
Oh yes. Yeah, and I guess what you made me say, yes, you are choosing all the time. But I guess it's that realization as you use that is like the awareness that, you know, you are choosing, whether you're aware of it or not.
Yeah.
And so being aware of it, even if it's even if it doesn't work out, being aware of it.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I was listening to somebody recently and they were talking about like, right or wrong. And so like, can I make the right choice or whatever? And they said, well, basically, no matter what you do, it's the right choice. And I was like, oh, you're right. It's like that. Because really, when you go, that whole idea, like you decide to do something, you have no idea how it's going to, like, you think you know how it's going to turn out, but you really don't know how it's going to turn out.
And that's where most people spend their lives, is trying to hedge their bets and not make decisions that could likely turn out badly. However, sometimes having a decision made and it turning out badly means it's now over with and you can get on to your life.
Right. Or you learn, if you learn something from whatever you chose, then really, it's just going to get you where you need to be faster.
Right. Yeah, it's all a runway to your future.
It's all runway.
So, in terms of taking a moment or two to just kind of settle into a summary for this conversation.
Oh, were you asking me? I wasn't sure if that was directed to me.
I think that was the Lord responding. Yes.
Okay. Um, I would say find somehow, even if it's like I said, just for a few seconds to create a little space around in your day. It doesn't need to be anything. Like, I mean, if I stand up and take a few deep breaths, and my new thing is like I have to feel five things in my body. I have to hear five things if I can hear five things.
Yep.
And then I have to follow, like try to do so. And then I merge the two together. So I'm feeling my body and I'm hearing at the same time. And I do a cycle of one breath from beginning of the inhale to the end of the exhale.
Right.
And I do that maybe, I don't know, like a good few dozen times a day, where I just stand up and I'll start to get overwhelmed or anxious or just, I don't know, worried or something. And I'll be like, okay, pause, feel your body. What can you hear? Follow one breath. And I do that throughout my day now.
I think
My,
that's a great practice. I really do.
my favorite thing to do now. I'm just like, oh, okay. It's easy. Gives my mind something to do that's not the same old
Right.
way of thinking. And I'm like, oh, I can do this.
Interesting and fascinating. And it might be noteworthy. I'm just going to presence this so that we can be thinking about it. We have 3 more episodes to get to 200.
Ooh, okay. Are we going to have a party?
I think we need to have a party. Yeah, we definitely need a party. Well, I will begin to sign off by saying this, ladies and gentlemen. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world out there. Be careful. You protect and guard your equanimity. And I
Mhm.
think, as Jan was alluding to earlier, you can set boundaries consciously of the things that you would normally get triggered by and the conversations that you'd get sucked into. You don't have to. Sometimes there's we have a saying around my house. We basically, if there's something we don't want to get involved with, I look at my wife and I say, "Not my circus." And she looks back at me and smiles and she says, "Not my monkeys." We've been saying that for a long time. And that allows us to, without having a conversation about it, change the subject to something that we do want to talk about, that we do want present in our life. So, spread love, spread joy, be amazed, give yourself the gift of several times a day, just, having those thoughts, of who you are, why you're here, and why it's important that you're here. I'm going to leave you with this thought. Um, I didn't get to hear this man speak who said it, but I heard several people repeat it. And he said, "There's only 2 things in the universe, that's nothing and bullshit." Choose your bullshit. Choose the bullshit that empowers you and make that your game. I think that word communicates. It was probably stated the first time close to 50 years ago. But if you stop and think about it, when you have no reaction to what's going on, that's nothing. When you have a reaction to something, it's something. And if that something's not working for you, choose something that does. And sometime in the near future, we can have a whole show that's dedicated to how that shows up in the world for different people, because it's a rich conversation. It's not a one word that means the same thing to all sorts of different people. It has a connotation, and the coin of the realm these days is that language is a lot less formal than it used to be. And what we used to call sloppy speaking, using a word like that, and other ones, you said kindly earlier that a word that you, I know you were thinking of a 4-letter word that you weren't about to say out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind people do. And at the same time, since you and I care about so many people in the world, we're less worried about the message and we're more worried about the listener and the message received, right?
Mm-hmm.
So with that in mind, do we have any requests for people?
Well, our always request is reach out to someone and let them know that, you appreciate them and that you're happy they're in your life. And I guess my one suggestion would be, choose maybe a person whom, like a stranger, like someone who checks you out at the grocery store, or, you know, someone who, your your post your post person, your mail person, if you don't know them, but I don't know, have it ripple out.
I personally love that. Thank
Especially especially since Jan is a postal person.
Absolutely. I get to hear her great stories every day. They're usually about people who give her things, um, and the doggies. And as you can imagine, I think she's got close to 500, uh, you know, uh, stops on her route in particular. But thank you for mentioning that. She's a very valuable person, and she's a woman that has a master's degree, and she prefers to be a postal delivery person.
Okay. Everybody's valuable.
And you get to choose. That's the whole point. Cat Stevens said, oh, very young, you're only dancing on this world for a short time.
Mm-hmm.
Though you want it to last forever, it never will.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll leave you with that thought. And thank you very much for your invitation to everyone. We are lighting the candle, a world that works. I'm Bill Correll, and this is my true friend, Jan Jeremias. Thank you all. Love you all. Thanks, Jan.
Oh, thank you, Bill.
You've been listening to Lighting the Candle, a world that works, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Lighting the Candle, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.